At this point, I've played the Callisto Protocol probably 4 times, and every time I go through it, I have the same thought. I want to like this more than I do. This game is graphically very impressive, the voice acting is exceptional, there's so much depth to the world and the history, but yet, in the end, I'm always left mildly unenthused by the time the credits roll.
Jacob, there might be a way out after all.
Reactor core temporary safeties activated.
But I'm going to need your help.
Now, let me start by saying that I do enjoy this game. It's kind of like empty calories for me. I find the combat to be passable. It gets a bit repetitive after a while, especially in the latter half, but it didn't feel like a slog at any point, and I also find the story to be adequate. I like the mystery of Jacob's role in all of this, and I think that the world building is exceedingly interesting. Having a central power like the UJC, who's been colonizing and terraforming all the moons of Jupiter, is fascinating. And yet, when you try to dig your teeth in beyond the events of the actual game, it's like a mirage. To take someone like Leon Ferris, for example, we know next to nothing about him. We know of things surrounding him, events at the prison, what the UJC through their scientists were doing, and we can kind of guess a bit of his role in that, but that's about it. We are privy to little history of this character before Jacob comes into contact with him, which would be fine if he were the exception, but he's instead the rule. This game has a character problem in my opinion, in that it doesn't want us to get to know these people beyond their current actions, which is so strange because the world has been set up so well and yet is unexplored. Callisto was being terraformed by the UJC's miners, but they found something below the surface, and it triggered a horrible disease. The UJC would investigate the panicked calls from these miners and see potential in the virus, establishing a research center on the moon and then a prison surrounding it to use as test subjects with this pathogen.
After securing the site, a lab was constructed, and later a prison surrounding it. A research base with a readily available pool of test subjects.
That's why Black Iron was built. It's all been some kind of an experiment.
But that all happened 75 years ago, supposedly, and then nothing significant occurred until Jacob crash landed in 2320. It's like you have a base floor of the deep lore of the miners and Arcus, as well as some details about the UJC and the commonality, then a massive gap of nothing, then finally events start occurring again with the devastation of Europa. It makes the game feel hollow to me when we have such massive swaths of time missing from the record and we're just, I guess, meant to assume that it was just business as usual for everyone until things kicked off. For example, who was Danny before the events of Europa? How involved with the experiments at Black Iron was Ferris? What made Jacob so desperate for money that he was willing to take shady jobs? I don't need the answers to all of these questions, but none of them? The only character who really benefits from this lack of depth is probably Elias, and he's arguably the one we get the most backstory about. He was in prison for a long time, working various jobs like we see down in the sewers, and was searching for a way out. His story working well because we don't know everything about him. He tells us that he's in here for murder with very sparse details, leading to the conundrum of if we're really doing the right thing by helping him. His statement about being the one to blame for his actions, leaving it to the player if he's genuine. Of course, he dies regardless, but it's an interesting question of disassociating a person from their bad act for the good that they've done for us. Our best friend on Callisto is a murderer. Regardless of their aid, should we be morally okay with helping them escape?
What? You worried you're helping a murderer, Esco?
Well, yeah, kinda.
Well, you are, man. So what?
For him, those lack of details work because it creates a moral dilemma when our biggest ally turns out to be a bad dude who's arguably redeemed. But for everyone else, it just makes them feel a bit bland. For someone like Danny, the timeline would suggest that she was associated with the Outer Way even before the events of Europa, but we're given no context for that. Where were her parents during the outbreak, and why was her young sister left to die alone in the streets? This could, in theory, reflect very poorly on Danny for leaving Lily, opening up her desperation for revenge due to guilt. But ultimately, those answers aren't addressed, and we have no idea what truly happened to lead to her main plot point in her story. To me, this is the biggest issue with this game in terms of finding something to latch onto. It's hard to identify with characters who we know next to nothing about. Of course, I'm not saying that every one of these people needed extensive backstories, but in my opinion, we needed more context to these people to forge more of a lasting impression. Again, I think the world is excellently crafted, and clearly they wanted to expand on that world with things like the Helix Station podcast drama as promotion, and the comics which revolve around Danny finding out about Jacob, but in my opinion, they put the cart in front of the horse in terms of the story with this game, and it shows in the final product. It feels like they were so intent on creating an interesting world that they forgot to make compelling characters who live in it, giving us the baseline of a story that they wanted to flesh out in sequels and spin-offs, which, at this point, are dead in the water. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say. I'm still going to cover some of the characters, as scant as their backstory can be at times, but I thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.